Welcome everyone. We're just going to give it a few more moments as everyone is logging in. So your screen might be blank, but we'll be starting momentarily.
I can't reach it.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Matt Twyman. I'm the current Director of Alumni Relations here at Tower Hill, and I just wanted to welcome you all to our virtual Tower Talk here during homecoming, our first virtual homecoming meeting. I also just right now wanted to turn it over to our head of school, Bessie Spears, just to say a few words. Bessie? Bess, you just need to unmute.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Matt Twyman, our stalwart alumni director, for organizing what we have dearly called Tower Talks. And we are so privileged to have Mr. Jim Morris with us. Tom Spears and I had the privilege of visiting Pixar Studios a year or two ago, and Jim was a wonderful host. Jim has been back to campus a number of times and spoken to our students. And so we're really thrilled to have Jim back to help us kick off our first ever virtual homecoming weekend. So thank you, Jim. I'll turn it back to Matt.
Thank you, Bessie. So before we get started, I just want to kind of tell everybody how it will operate today. I'm going to read a brief bio of Jim and some of his works. Then I'm going to turn over to Jim. There will be a point towards the end of the meeting where you will be allowed to ask questions. We just ask that you put your questions into the chat, and then Melissa Pizarro and I, who work here at Tower Hill, will be able to field the questions for Jim. But without any further ado, Jim is a proud graduate of Tower Hill's class of 1973. He then went on to earn his bachelor's science degree in film and a master of science degree in television and radio from Newhouse School at Syracuse University. Jim is currently the president of Pixar Animation Studios, where he oversees all of the company's productions and operations. Jim began working at Pixar in 2005. Films under his supervision have included Ratatouille, Up, Toy Story 3, Cars 2, Brave, Monster University, Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, Finding Dory, Cars 3, Coco, Incredible, and Onward. As a producer, Jim most recently made the live action feature for Disney's John Carter with director Andrew Stanton. He also produced Pixar's WALL-E, which won Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Jim was also awarded Producer of the Year in Animated Theatrical Motion Pictures from the Producers Guild of America, the AFA Award, the Golden Globe, and the Visual Effects Society Best Animated Feature Award for WALL-E. Prior to joining Pixar, Jim held a range of key positions for 17 years in various divisions of Lucasfilms Ltd. He served as the president of Lucas Digital Ltd. And managed its three divisions: Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, Skywalker Sound, and Lucasfilm Animation. As ILM's general manager for more than 13 years, he supervised a staff of over 1,400 artists and technicians and guided the largest visual effects facility in entertainment industry. With Jim's oversight, ILM created the groundbreaking and Academy Award-winning virtual effects in Jurassic Park, Death Becomes Her, Terminator 2, and Forrest Gump. Other notable projects completed under his management included Mission Impossible, Twister, Saving Private Ryan, Star Wars Episodes 1 and 2, The Perfect Storm, Pearl Harbor, Minority Report, Pirates of the Caribbean, Masters and Commander, and 3 Harry Potter films. Jim most recently visited Tower Hill back in October of 2018 as part of the Centennial Speaker Series, where he spoke with alumni and students, and he shared his passion and his love for animation. And he shared with us how Pixar movies are approached in their take on filmmaking. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Jim Morris. Jim?
There I am.
There you are.
Stifled by technology once again. It's a miracle it all works. I'm glad to see everybody. Hello, happy homecoming weekend. Like many of you, I'm sorry I can't be there in person to celebrate, but I'm grateful we can at least use the wonders of modern technology to get together. I'm Jim. I'm honored to be asked to talk a little bit about my time at Tower Hill and what I've been up to since. I started at Tower Hill in the 7th grade, and back then there was a little photographic darkroom off the side of the chemistry lab, and that piqued my interest. Movies and photography had always been kind of interesting to me, and I got excited by the idea that people could actually shoot and process their own film and print it and so forth. So I spent a lot of time in that darkroom, as did some of my colleagues and at the time classmates. Phil Bradford was one in particular, spent a lot of time developing and printing in there. And that plus my attraction to movies in general, and probably like the attraction everybody has, I guess particularly my fascination with the skeletons that came to life in Ray Harryhausen's Jason and the Argonauts, got me thinking about how do you make movies. I'd sort of figured out, oh, you can do your own photography. How do you make movies? So fortunately for me, for some reason, there was a little Super 8 camera around Tower Hill, and I borrowed it, and I started making some little stop motion animated films with my classmates, and friends helped me out with that as well. And the great thing was I had several terrific teachers at the time who actually let me submit movies instead of papers in a number of instances. So I actually had support from the school to make these little films. Instead of my U.S. history paper for the year, I turned in a film instead. And I actually felt like I got away with something, although I probably spent 50 times the hours on the film I probably would have spent on the paper. But growing up in Delaware, which wasn't exactly the film capital of the world then, I never took any of the, I never thought about it other than as, something fun and something that was kind of a hobby and something that intrigued me. And the thing that was, we have pivotal moments in our life, and one of them happened as I was a junior getting ready to go off to, actually I was going to go to Tufts and study psychology. But I had this great English teacher. He'd been my 8th grade teacher, but he'd been kind of a mentor to me since then. It was Jim Wood, who was a very wry, interesting guy. And he asked me when we were having coffee, and he said, "What are you going to do for college?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, why are you doing that? The hell with that, go to film school." And it hadn't really occurred to me that you could actually kind of do that. And I said, "Can you make a living at that?" And he said, "Well, you'll figure it out. Don't worry about it." So I'd applied to Syracuse University in the, I think, arts and science areas, and I was able to shift my, my school over to the Newhouse School, which had a film program there at the time, and that's where I got started. So I really wouldn't be doing this at all had I not been at Tower Hill and had those opportunities and that support from everyone. So it got me on the road and also taught me a lot of stuff to make films about, if I could put it that way, So thank you, Tower Hill. My journey since I left when I saw a film called Black Stallion. I was working at WCNY TV as a documentary person in Syracuse before I came to California, and I saw this movie, and I decided I really wanted to go work for the guy that made that movie because it really spoke to me on so many levels. So I moved to San Francisco which was touted as Hollywood North at the time. It wasn't, but it was active at the time. There were a lot of filmmakers making things. I didn't actually meet the guy who made Black Stallion, Carol Ballard, for about 15 years after that. And I met him at an airport and never really had an opportunity to work with him. But many good things happened. And I got a job as an editor. I'd done some of that work before. And then I got a job as a producer at an ad agency. And that led eventually to getting hired at Lucas to put their first commercial division together. But I jumped over to the movie side as quick as I could and had a very auspicious first film, Caddyshack 2, not even Caddyshack 1, Caddyshack 2. I'm sure you all watch it frequently for its wonderfulness as a piece of cinema. But anyway, I eventually became head of production and then general manager and then president at ILM and then eventually Skywalker Sound as well, and then Lucasfilm Animation. I had those three divisions under me. And so I got to work on a terrific breadth of films. It was a really exciting time. Matt mentioned some of the films. We were kind of at that point in time where we were migrating from the photomechanical era where you'd shoot film and then make opticals. You'd go through a photochemical process and take lots of film elements and marry them together in the optical printer. And that's how we did a lot of the effects back then. But when I got there, we started doing more and more digital work. Pixar had been part of Lucasfilm, and then George Lucas sold it to Steve Jobs. It wasn't called Pixar until after the sale, but it was called the Computer Graphics Division. And I got there just as they were being sold, and I kind of ended up being heavily involved in the computer graphics part of Lucasfilm. But Pixar was still there, and Ed Catmull, who was one of the founders of Lucasfilm Computer Science, and also the president of Pixar at that time, the new Steve Jobs company, they were still on the same campus. And Ed and I became friends. And though they were making animated films and we were doing visual effects for films, there was a lot of crossover and cohesion there. We were felt like sister companies, and we shared a lot of technology and just thinking and so forth. And we were both growing the companies at the time. Ed was growing Pixar and I was growing ILM. So I worked at ILM for a number of almost 2 decades across the Lucas companies. And then I'd been out of producing for so long, I kind of wanted to get back into that, and ended up going to Pixar to work for Ed and the folks there to produce WALL-E is the reason I got hired there. Not too far into that time, we actually got acquired by Disney. Steve Jobs sold the company to Disney, which worked out terrifically on many levels. But I did continue. I finished WALL-E. I took on the head of production role, so I was overseeing the production of the other films. And then around the acquisition time, I became general manager as well. So I was overseeing all the business operations and those types of things as well. It's great being at Pixar. It's a company that has always been devoted to trying to make the best sort of movie experiences, best cinema experiences, and has had the courage and intestinal fortitude and willingness to spend the money and try to do it right. And so we have recently finished our 23rd film, which is called Soul. And I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes and actually show you some stuff from Soul. But I want to show you a little primer we made that's, I think, about a 10-minute film. It's just been finished. It's a short documentary that's intended to give kind of a behind the scenes look at how we make our films, give you an overall sense. It is destined for Disney Plus, which is our streaming service. Not exactly sure when it releases on Disney Plus. So this is kind of a sneak peek. I don't think it's still a work in progress. It's largely done, if not 100% done. But I thought it was kind of a cool little way to give you an overview and show you some of the types of personalities that work at Pixar. And I'll talk a little bit more about our process after I show up, but I'm going to fire that off. It's about 10 minutes. I will see if I can manage to launch that here. And bear with me a moment. And we will see if we can't do that. Hopefully you all see this. That is not what we're going to show you now. We're going to show you this. Hey, everybody. So hopefully that gives you a little sense of how we make these things. You know, Daniel Feinberg mentioned, you know, how many people, how it takes a lot of people to do it, and that the computer is sort of a tool in the process. It's interesting because we actually use more labor to make a computer animated film than is typically used on making a hand-drawn film. In fact, our average is about 20,000 person weeks to make one of these films. And they broke it down a bit for you in terms of the different stages. Our average is about 5 years. The first year is used kind of working the core idea and starting to work with a writer to flesh that out and bringing your story team on that they alluded to. It's usually about 10 to 12 people that are drawing storyboards. They stay on for years making version after version, as they alluded to. We typically now make about 8 versions of the film before we get to the final version. And it's not as if you throw everything out as you go to the next version. It's refinement, figuring out what works and what doesn't, what makes sense, and also kind of figuring out what the thing is. My friend Andrew Stanton says that making one of these films, you're kind of a paleontologist. You start with an idea, and you start searching around in the earth, and you find the bone, and you think you have a stegosaurus, and you start assembling the bones you find, and over time you realize, no, you have a brontosaurus instead, and the thing kind of tells you what it needs to be and what it's about in some ways, as you've got your crew working with you. At the height of these films, they typically now have 300 people working on them in animation and so forth. The kind of crew ramps up over the course of time as it goes into the different phases. So they take a long time. They take about the same time as going to college and graduate school when you get right down to it. And we have a lot of these going on at the same time. We have films in all different stages of production and completion. We make a movie and a half a year. We release 3 movies every 2 years. We finish one essentially every 8 months. And we have about 1,200 people at the company that it takes to do that. We are also now doing a lot of streaming production. Disney Plus is the streaming outlet that the Disney company owns, and we're ramping up to make about 150 minutes of animation for them a year. We already make about 150 minutes of animation for the feature side per year. So we're constantly making new shows. We've got 4 in production on the feature side, and other 4 in development that are in early stages of figuring out some of the steps you saw there. We have been very lucky at Pixar that we've been able to continue to work during the COVID time here. We work at computer stations, of course, although the collaboration that takes place when we're in the studio is really, really important. But we've had to adapt, as many people have. And as I say, we've been really lucky that we've been able to keep working. It's not been easy to keep working. People are juggling their kids at home and so forth, and dealing with all that, is obviously all you are as well. But we did finish a film called Soul in the process of COVID times. We were in our last several weeks of that film and have started others since then. Soul was supposed to come out in June, and then the release date was moved to the weekend before Thanksgiving. But as the theaters have closed down and other movies have moved, we really couldn't get enough screens to release the movie to be successful. we thought about holding it till next year, but there's so many movies that have moved into next year due to COVID that it's difficult to find a good release corridor for it, given all the other films that are there. So we've actually moved it to Disney Plus, the streaming service, which is great. It's going to release on Christmas Day, and a lot of people will be able to see it, and a lot of people will be able to see it in the comfort of their own homes. And it's I was talking to Matt earlier and Bessie, and it has a lot of flavor of It's a Wonderful Life, the famous Capra film, and has a great message to it that I think is very timely for right now. We're really stoked about the movie. The music you were just hearing actually was written by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, the Nine Inch Nails guys, and they've written some beautiful themes for this. They did the score for most of the film, and then the great musician John Batiste has done all our jazz arrangements. The movie is about a guy named Joe Gardner, who you see in the movie, and he is he's a middle school music teacher, and he is also a jazz musician who's been practicing jazz and learning jazz all his life. And the movie is the day he gets his big break, and then steps down a manhole cover. And it is about him trying to figure out what his life's about. It's his big moment. Can he get back and play the one thing that he's cared about as the most important thing in his whole life? And the film is about that, and what is important, and how do you come to grips with that, and loss and failure and so forth. And it's funny too, don't get me wrong, but it's as typical, has a lot of heavier themes that our movies tend to than the average animated movies. In addition, I mentioned we are doing a lot of streaming work now for Disney Plus. We're actually doing an 8-part series that'll come out in a couple of years. That's our first sort of major television series, and it's of kind of the same quality levels we're used to making. So there's a lot of work behind that. We had a couple things you may have seen if any of you subscribe to Disney Plus. We had a series called Forky Asks a Question, the Forky character from Toy Story 4, and they're just little shorts. But we actually won an Emmy Award for those this year. And then we have a series called Spark Shorts, and Spark Shorts are films where we pick somebody we think might be a good storyteller who is not really an anointed director at Pixar, and give them a small budget and a period of time to make a film whatever they want. They don't need to get creative approvals or anything. So they make something that they're passionate about. We like to see, left to their own devices, what kind of stories would these folks tell. And one of the stories is called Float. It's a story about a father with a son with autism. And that got a Peabody nomination this year. So they've been getting some notoriety, but if you get a chance, look at the Spark Shorts. They're little independent artist statements, but there's some really great stuff there. So that's what I've got for you today. I've taken up about 40 minutes of time here, and I thought I'd leave maybe 20 or so for a Q&A if anybody has any questions or wants me to talk about other stuff. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt and Melissa.
Thank
Jim,
you so
thank you
much,
very-
Jim. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was going to say thank you very much. Really enjoyed that. The animation is just incredible. And again, a lot of great films and a lot of great work. So thank you once again for sharing. Melissa Bizzaro and I, who also work in the office now, we'd like to take any questions that anyone has. You can actually use the chat feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. And then we will take the questions and kind of pose them to Jim. We have over 76 people that are on. So I'm sure there's got to be at least 1 or 2 questions that are out there.
So I actually saw the first comment come through, Jim, while you were showing that video. And it says, congratulations on doing animation featuring people of color.
Yeah, we like most movie studios and establishments, we haven't done a great job historically of that. And our key, our key people that started the company, it was a bunch of white guys out of film school. And of course, they came and they told the stories they tell and from the experiences they have. And our industry has not had a great talent pool available of people of color out there, and not a great talent pool for women, because they weren't, for probably lots of legit reasons, attracted to the types of things that we're doing. So we've been playing a lot of catch up on that and trying to lean into that as everybody has to do better. That film is about African Americans, although it's not about being African American. The character happens to be African American. The co-director and writer of the film is a great guy named Kemp Powers, and he is African American, and he wrote a great play called One Night in Miami, if you're familiar with it. And it's about the night. It's a true story. It is the night that Cassius Clay, who moments later became Muhammad Ali, won a huge upset in a fight in I think it was against Sonny Liston in Miami. And he went to spend that evening. He had become friends with Malcolm X and Jim Brown and fantastic soul singer, kind of the father of soul. My Saturday morning brain is completely locking up. It'll come to me in a moment. Anyway, you get these four luminaries in African American culture kind of spending this night together, and nobody thought Ali was going to win this fight, so there was no after parties or anything planned. So they go to Malcolm X's motel room, and they hang out for the night. And so Kemp kind of wrote this thing about what is it like to, what would they have talked about? To him, it was like the Black Avengers, like what would have happened to have all this group together. And it's a terrific play. It has just been made into a film directed by Regina King, and got the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival, and it won the top award at Toronto, and it's coming out soon. I think, I can't remember exactly when it's coming out. Anyway, we're lucky enough to get Kemp in on this, and so Pete's like the whitest guy in the world from Minnesota, and though he had this idea for this film was his, he didn't have all of the experience to kind of bring authenticity to the Black part of the story. And so we have built around our stories, many of which, Coco obviously was Mexican story, Latinx, and we've built cultural trusts around these films to bring in people to help with the authenticity. And that is things we need to do while we're on the road to building up more directors of color. Now, the good news is we're not doing too bad on that front right now. In fact, I will try to see if I can share this. Bear with me. As you can tell, my facility of doing keynote stuff is not the greatest on the planet. I'm going to share this screen. Can everybody see that? Is that up there? So this is our director group now. And it is quite different than the director group of 5 years ago. I'm gonna show you that group. As you will see, there's an awful lot of middle-aged white guys in this group. This guy's actually got a Afro-Cuban grandmother, but he never sort of identified that way. And then we have one Filipino guy and we have one Korean guy, and everybody else is pretty white. So we jump forward 4 years and we have a very different complexion. And Domi Shi, who is the woman you see here, is making a terrific feature film right now. She is the woman who made Bao, which was the short in front of Incredibles, if you happen to see that. Pete Sohn has made a bunch of movies, our Korean guy, but we have a bunch of women in. Carrie and Michael here down in the lower left-hand corner are the two writers and directors that are making our big time Disney Plus series. It is their original idea. It is, they're very young, and we've handed the keys to the car to them. So we're they're kind of channeling all their experience. We looked to all these filmmakers to bring their own sensitivities and sensibilities to this film. We have Afton, who's just finished, our young African-American woman who actually is just finishing up a terrific short. Louis Gonzalez over in the lower right-hand corner, who has been a story guy, and he has just finished up a short. Daniel Chong, here if you can see my cursor, who has in process on a feature film. So we're doing better. We still have a long ways to go. This gentleman in the upper right-hand corner, Adrian Molina, was the co-director on Coco, and he is making an original feature as well. So all these folks are kind of that's our stable these days, and we are trying hard to do better in our diversity ranks. And my agenda is to get people into senior leadership positions, because then that informs the types of films we're making, and it kind of trickles down from there. So this is on our minds a lot now. I've probably talked more than I should have about it and taken up the time, but especially in the waves of social justice issues and so forth we're dealing with now. It's a priority for us, priority for Disney, so we're trying. We got a long way to go, but we're at it.
Sure. Thank you. So we have several questions here. I'll start with the first one I see, which is, which film that you've worked on would you like to see come to life next in one of the Disney parks, like Cars Land in California Adventure, Toy Story Land in Hollywood Studios?
I would say I'd like to see. I think there's a lot of fertile ground with the Inside Out material. I think that there's a lot of stuff we could do there. The Disney's the parks are a little challenged at the moment, to say the least, with COVID, and so there's been we're not doing a lot of new work for the parks now. We have a theme park team at Pixar that oversees the creative work and guides the creative work that is done in the parks that represents our films. But right now it's basically, there's a pin in it, because the parks are, the Disneyland is an open, Disney World is open to a low capacity. So the wick is down on those, but that's the one I'd like to see. I think there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with that.
Sure.
Thank you. I think our next question is, what do you think has been the greatest factor in your success?
Luck. No, I did get passionate about making films, and I think it was probably, getting that kind of support early, when I was a student and so forth. But I think, I guess the greatest factor is as I've gone through my career, I've tried to pick opportunities that might lead to something I want to do. And by that, I mean, of course I would have liked to be doing feature films the minute I finished college, but that wasn't in the cards. So I tried to find things that were in the entertainment business that were allied or related to, and find the path that I could go, and kind of keep my goal in mind, and try to figure out how to take best advantage of the opportunities that became clear. So, I worked as a TV news cameraman when I was going to Syracuse to kind of put myself through school, but they let me use the equipment in off hours, and I made a documentary that got the attention of the local PBS station. And then when I finished school, they hired me to do a series, an educational series, and then asked me to do some documentaries there. And then I learned how to be an editor and all of those types of things. So when I made my decision to pack up my Chevette and move to California, where I didn't know anybody, eventually I got a job working as an editor. Had that background, and I met a person who said, "Yeah, you should go take a look at the ad market's big in San Francisco. You should look at that. And you can learn how to make high-end 35mm films. They're short projects, but you can learn that." So I got a job at an ad agency that eventually led to ILM hired me to create their first commercial division. So I knew I wanted to be making movies, and I made shorts and music videos all through those times and so forth, just independent stuff. I think kind of keeping the dream alive in my mind, and sort of seeing those as steps to get there, even if it's kind of a zigzaggy path, was maybe the thing that allowed me to continue with it and get to where I did. And then all the lessons you learn along the way about how to manage and lead and make these projects, that it kind of all stacks up over time. But I've been really lucky. I've been fortunate to have these opportunities, and not everybody gets those same tailwinds, and uh, been happy to have them.
Sure. So I'm gonna kind of combine a couple questions here, and you might answer this one. The first part of the question is, what was your first movie you made? And then kind of the second part is, you were talking about kind of your day. How has your day-to-day changed since you've moved up to be president of Pixar?
Well, I made some little, I guess the first movie I made was Mr. Lovell's animation class. I was probably in the 8th grade, I think, and it was a yarn animation, little thing we did. But the first one that was that mattered probably was I did actually coincidentally make a film. There was one black guy in our class at Tower Hill. His name was Larry Hinson, and we became friends. We kind of lived close to each other. We were both kind of from a blue collar neighborhood. We were not we were that part of Tower Hill at the time, and we made this film together. It was about this black guy. I mean, he looked older. Now I look back at the film, he looks like a 9th grader, but at the time he looked like he was a young man compared to the rest of us. And that's a film I just dug up recently because somebody asked me about it. It was interesting to see. But that's probably one of the first films that I made that was actually looked kind of like a film, and had a beginning, middle, and end, and had sync sound and music in it and so forth. I'm trying to figure, this is the stuff kids have now to work with is amazing. We were kind of in the dark age. You got 8mm film, which is like spaghetti, and there's no sound or anything. Like, you have to do separate sound and then have them add a little magnetic stripe to the end and borrow a projector somewhere that you could record onto and so forth. It was very primitive by standards. What I do now, I spend about half my time on creative matters and about half my time on business and operational matters, and they're not disconnected. But I meet with all of the directors every week or two individually, and just talk to them about where their project is and see what help they need, and the producers as well. As we're developing projects, I am involved in all the key milestones. We'll get a pitch, and then the pitches have to be approved to go to storyboards or to script, and treatments and scripts. And once the treatment's approved, it needs to be approved to go to script. And then when a script is approved, it needs to be approved to go to storyboards. And you saw that process kind of starting that. And once we see the first set of reels, eventually we have to green light the movie. We green light the movie based on the first set of reels, typically, sometimes the second set. And I'm involved in all of those junctures. I'm also a member of what we call the Brain Trust, which is not meant to sound as pretentious as it does. But basically it's the directors and the writers. We watch those versions of the films that you see, those storyboarded versions, those reels, and in the hand-drawn form. And then we make notes about them, what's working, what's not, and what we think could help fix it. And we give those notes to the filmmaker. It's not mandatory. We don't say you need to go do this. We give them our reactions and thoughts, and then they take them and they make their next version. The best ones hear what the problem is and come up with a different solution than anything we're talking about. And I'm involved in those steps. I'm also the key person reporting into Disney and the bosses there in terms of where we are financially, creatively, and those types of things. And I work closely with the departments there, whether it's marketing, publicity, consumer products, international casting for the voices for our dubs overseas, all of the finishing work and so forth. The other half of the job is really kind of the back office things. I oversee business affairs and legal. I oversee recruiting and human resources. I oversee finance, production finance and accounting, those types of things. I oversee our diversity and inclusion efforts, and I oversee our internal talent management efforts. We have, of our 1,200-ish people, about 800 of them are the people that actually make the stuff you see on the screen. And the other 400, there's, well, basically 300 of those people build the tools that we use to make them, the computer graphics tools, the software, and about 100 of those people keep it all working, keep the systems working, make it so we can do this kind of thing. And so our people can work remotely and everybody's computer has all the stuff on it it needs and the systems work. So I spend a lot of time, shaping and guiding those activities behind the scenes there. So those are kind of the two halves of the job, the kind of the creative and the business side. My partner, Pete Doctor, is kind of 100% creative, and he has, I weigh in on everything. He has final say creatively on that kind of thing. And the converse is sort of true on the business side. He weighs in on everything and I kind of have final say on all the business side stuff. So that's kind of a day in my life. They're very long now on Zoom. It seems like I have 20 Zoom meetings a day. It has not simplified my existence by any means.
Well, thank you, Jim. This is a nice piggyback on that question. A comment from Trisha. This was excellent. Thank you. When you watch a film, are you still able to immerse yourself in the movie watching experience? Or do you find yourself focused on the technical aspects, either things that could have been done better or things that went really well?
I totally get sucked into the movie still. I'm still a great audience and fan. And I, which makes my, I know how hard it is to make a film, no matter what. I also know nobody sets out to make a bad film, although we've all certainly seen them. So I can't even pull myself away from a bad film. Like I have to watch it and see the whole thing. Where my wife is like, she'll be done in 10 minutes saying this is awful. I know, but that one actor's really good and I want to watch her or whatever it is that it is. No, I can kind of get absorbed and still appreciate the technical things that are going on, and I'll reflect back on them after I see them. But I just get, if a film's working, it attacks you on an appeal on an emotional level, and if a film's putting that stuff forward, I'm in, and just I'm a good audience that way.
Right.
I am not jaded.
So kind of to that point, Steve in class of 94 has a question. You had mentioned Jason and the Argonauts being such a touchstone. His question to you is there a genre that you personally would love to see Pixar pursue?
Well, it's interesting, we have this thing, like everybody talks about Pixar films, right? Like there's this thing that's a Pixar film. And in my experience is we make a new film and then it becomes a Pixar film because it somehow is another chapter in that, when we were making, I mean, if you think, when I got to Pixar and I was making WALL-E, Ratatouille was in production, the movie about a rat who's a chef. WALL-E's about a trash compactor. And then Up, which is in production, is, what's it about? Well, it's a Cub Scout and an old man go on a trip together. It's like, wait a minute. I'm uncomfortable hearing that. What's going on? And once these films come out, they get kind of, certainly I think there's a quality similarity in them, but from a story point of view, I don't even know, I guess WALL-E would be a sci-fi genre film and so forth. And we actually have another film that would qualify as a sci-fi genre. I love the sci-fi genre. What would I say from a genre point of view? I don't think so. It's interesting because many people look at animation as a genre, but I don't look at animation as a genre. I look at animation as a production methodology. It's a way to make a film, and those, at the root of that question, there's certainly very, anime is probably considered a genre. They tend to be, steampunk in nature. They have similar themes, they're futuristic, often post-apocalyptic in feel, those kinds of things that you see. So I would say that's probably a genre within animation. Certainly we could say the musical is a genre within animation. I know my colleague Brad Bird has a film noir animated film that he's been wanting to make for decades that he's kind of noodling on. So I don't know. I guess as much as anything that I more than a genre, some flights of wild imagination is the thing I'd like to see, pursued more, and things that are parts of soul are like that, talking about the great before. It's it's kind of difficult and edgy stuff to get into. We've got a guy who's kind of died, who's broken the rules, and he's trying not to go to the great beyond. And those are the kinds of things when I see them, and a lot of the filmmakers that I showed you are doing things you just go like, where did that come from, and how can you possibly make a movie about that? That's sort of I guess that's the genre of unknown weirdness is probably the one I would like to go for.
Sure.
Thank you. And we have, this is an interesting question from Olivia. What is your opinion on the recent trend adapting Disney animation into live action features? Can you see some of Pixar production being adapted?
Over my dead body. Look, I think they've actually done a great job with those films. I have very mixed feelings about it, to be perfectly honest. I like those films. Some of the filmmakers are fantastic filmmakers. I think they've done a great job with them. I bemoan the fact that we have to dig into that rather than putting original stuff out there. And I don't say that with any aversion to sequels or anything like that. I've seen lots of remakes that are great, but just as a trend, I'd rather see something new. I think the live action Mulan film's terrific. I don't think it's a better film than the animated one. And I think I'd probably say that across the board. I don't think that and maybe to the extent that it brings those stories to new audiences and in turn that interests them in taking a look at the animated version, there's nothing wrong with it. Those movies have worked well. They've been super entertaining. They're well made. But in general, I wish people were putting new stuff on the screen, just to be honest about it.
Sure. So one last question. I mean, there's a ton of questions we have going on in the chat, but I'm going to try to take a series of questions here. And I think these are probably coming from a student's perspective, and then we can go to Bessie to kind of help us close out. But there's a few questions related to what do you kind of see as, or what advice would you have for a student who's looking to pursue a career? Kind of piggyback with the folks that work with you, what's kind of the common trait do you see? And kind of what would you say or advice would you give to a student that's pursuing a career outside kind of the normal arts arena? And it's a little bit less risky. So a lot there, I know.
Wait, say the less risky part.
So yeah, what advice do you have for students who feel pressure to pursue career tracks outside of the arts, which are viewed as quote unquote less risky? So you kind of took
Well, a couple of things I'll say in general. First question that comes up certainly around film a lot of time, because there's all these stories of people who, got a job as a production assistant and learned skipped going to film school or going to college and so forth. That is not my advice at all. I think people should go to film school or media school, whatever, and more importantly, take a ton of courses in arts and sciences and anthropology and psychology and all those things, because what I do see is people that kind of get into the business sometimes and then end up not really having stories to tell and having things to tell stories about and interests that are beyond just the filmmaking side. I do think that there's a lot of great schools out there that teach different aspects of filmmaking, and there's some that specialize and have a great animation curriculum, and some that have live action. What I will say is that I don't know anybody who has been passionate about being in the movie business or animation business or the TV business. If they've been passionate and persistent, they always find a way in and they find some way to do it. So I certainly would encourage anyone. It's tricky, you know. I said about myself what that was, you know, I didn't have any vision for being able to do any of the kind of stuff I do now when I was in school, and it wasn't because it was only because it didn't exist as a reality where I grew up or where I was or anything. And and but if you take the leap of faith, it'll work out, as I guess what I'd say. You know, it seems like a tough thing. Like, I don't know if I can make a living being an artist, or I don't know if I can make a living doing some of this stuff. If you're passionate about it, you'll figure it out. I've got 1,200 people that get paid pretty well every day to come in and do this stuff. And we're a tiny piece of the entertainment business that does that.
Mhm.
It's exploded. You know, when I started at Industrial Light and Magic, it was the biggest effects studio in the world, and it had 400 people or less when I started there. There are probably at this moment in time 5,000 people that are effects and animation artists in Vancouver, 4,000 in London. I could go on and on, going across the world. The industry's exploded, you know, with all of the different streaming outlets. There's, you know, whole TV broadcast stations or cable stations at least dedicated to animation. They do nothing but animation. Netflix is doing more and more. Amazon's doing more. Disney Plus, of course, you know, Disney's kind of in the DNA. Animation's in the DNA. So anybody who is passionate about doing it, it's hard if you're not seeing somebody that's doing it to feel like, oh, I could make a career out of it. But I promise you, if you're passionate about it, you'll figure it out.
Well, thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it. I want to be sensitive to your time. Really appreciate you coming on this afternoon. I appreciate everyone who was here today. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. There's a ton more questions here. But Betsy, did you want to say a few closing remarks before I close it out? You're on mute, Bess. There you go.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Jim, thank you. Big Tower Hill cheer from 17th Street to you, and from all of the locations that our alums and families and friends and students. Just hooray, bravo. We are so proud to claim you as an alum. And I think more than anything, you give us hope. Your industry, I think, is thoughtfully considering how to help us imagine, really imagine beyond ourselves, and caretake for our communities and our country and the world at a really important time. So it's not lost on any of us who paid attention to your words that you know, what you do is a lot more than entertainment. It is real soul work, and we're just honored to have a good hour with you and be in conversation. And I hope that this has inspired a number of us to believe in the power of story. And I will tell you that Tom Spears, who couldn't be here right now for this, but wanted me to relay that one of his favorite shirts is his Woody shirt that he got at Pixar Studios, and he wears it proudly, and you can only get it at Pixar Studios. So Jim, best to you and Gail and your daughters, and we send you lots of love and appreciation for all that you mean to Tower Hill. And I want to thank my colleagues, Melissa Pizarro and Matt Twyman, for organizing a fantastic Tower Talk. And thank you all for tuning in. We will continue on with our virtual homecoming weekend. Jim, thanks for helping us kick this off. And we're on to 3:30 alumni awards. Matt, is that right? Distinguished Alumni Award and Young Alumni Award, and live stream football and State of the School at 3:30.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm proud
Thanks,
to.
Jim.
Yeah. Take care.
Great to see you.
Good to see you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Thanks.
afternoon.
Thanks.